My name's Danny Kane. I'm Design Director at Filament. We're a product development agency based just along the road in Finnieston. So we use a human-centred design approach to help our clients turn their ideas into feasible, desirable and hopefully successful products. My background's in, I studied both here and at GSA in engineering and design, so I feel like we've got a bit of a foot in both camps. Kick on. So the next 15 minutes or so, we've heard today a lot about sort of design theory and design processes. So hopefully I'm going to sort of try and put that in context and go through an actual project that we've delivered for a client. So yeah, let's go. So just to put it in a little bit of context as well, we've heard a lot today about collaboration and sort of ecosystems. So we've got a sort of core three sort of competencies, if you like, of product design, product engineering, and product strategy. And that's sort of, in a larger ecosystem, we realise that product development's pretty difficult. It takes a lot of people with a lot of different skill sets. So we've created this environment where we have strategic partners that we can bring in to help people along the way and create these multidisciplinary teams that really helps move projects forward. So over the last sort of 5 years or so, we've worked on sort of 50 or more projects in all different sectors, from companies from startups all the way through to sort of global brands in renewable energy, healthcare and medical, IoT, sort of electronics products, food and drink, kids' toys, all the way through to sort of financial products. And we don't really have a specialism, I would say. And people would say, is that not a negative? What do you specialise in? And I think it's actually one of our greatest strengths, that we are, a lot of the time we've seen earlier on in a few of the talks, that innovation often comes from the most unexpected places. So we use that sort of breadth of knowledge across a lot of sectors we've worked in, together with a sort of deep understanding of the design process and how to apply it to hopefully, not always, but hopefully have a successful conclusion to a project. Now this may be very, very familiar to people today. I totally agree that it's not the be-all and end-all, but it's a good way for us to, a lot of our clients don't really know much about the design process, so having something to help them visualise where they are along the way, or something so they can have a grasp on it, is really useful for us. So I'm going to use this sort of double diamond framework today, just to sort of take us through a project step by step. Really, we like to think about it in two sort of simple terms, and it's just make the right thing and make the thing right. So the left-hand side, in our experience, is the part that our clients mostly neglect, and they end up sort of thinking they know it all, they know exactly what they're going to make, who they're going to make it for, they spend a fortune on prototyping, engineering, tooling up, going to manufacture, and then suddenly they find out that it doesn't actually meet the needs that they thought it did, and it's a huge waste of money. So it's a really flexible process, and it can be sort of shaped. You know, not every project's the same. In fact, everyone's can be completely different. So everything from problem framing, we've worked on projects which are for Airbus, for what is the future of transport in 2050, which is, you know, hugely speculative, all the way down to people who have got a product refresh where they've already got an existing successful product and they're looking to sort of make an incremental iteration. So on to the sort of case study that I'm going to speak about today. And I chose this out of all the ones we've delivered because I thought it was hopefully a bit more relatable to today's audience. So this is the Altium i10, and it's a personal altitude simulator. And this, we work with a local startup, ScotLab, and the intellectual property was actually, it came out of a local university, starting with an S, so maybe a bad word around these parts. So what it is I've got in true Blue Peter fashion, I've got some show and tell props. So this is the final device, so don't worry, I'm not going to break into a jazz flute solo halfway through my talk. But what it is it's a device that athletes can use, both professional and keen amateurs, to feel the benefits that altitude simulation and training can give you. So it's a well-known phenomena that training at altitude can improve power performance and endurance across many sports. So I'll give you a quick background on how it works before we go through the process of how we got to this sort of funny looking cylinder at the end. You breathe in through the mouthpiece at the top, and that sort of sucks in ambient air through the bottom. And then when you exhale, you rebreathe it, and you rebreathe there, the CO2 is taken out by this canister here, and swirls around in this sort of internal mixing chamber. And after about 30 seconds, you start to sort of reach an equilibrium, where the mixing chamber is actually full of oxygen, which is depleted. So it's about 15% oxygen, as opposed to about the 21% you get at sea level. And this sort of protocol called intermittent hypoxication has been around for sort of 30 or 40 years in research studies, but no one had ever really taken advantage of it and tried to exploit it. And the benefits of this can be very similar to actual altitude training or training camps. So 15% oxygen equates to about 2,500 meters, which is coincidentally the height of Iten in Kenya, where it's probably one of the most famous altitude training camps where the product takes its name from. So, as I said, altitude training camps have been around for decades, and athletes really recognise that they are, it's hugely beneficial to most elite athletes in endurance sports, including Mo Farah, elite cyclists. Most of them well train at these altitude training camps at some point. But there's a few problems with them. They're massively expensive, so it's only the very, very top level elite athletes can take advantage of this. And so therefore it's a very small market. Also, you have to spend weeks or even months away from family and friends. So over the years, there's been sort of companies come out trying to make incremental improvements to this, making it cheaper, or sort of, different locations of camps to make it more accessible. But, it's still been a pretty niche market. So first, a few decades ago came the first sort of paradigm shift or sort of disruptive innovation, where some clever person thought, right, let's bring the altitude to us if we can't physically go there. And they had these altitude tents, which are great. They allow you to, in your home, you allow you to simulate the sort of benefits of altitude training. If you're an elite athlete, getting a few, knocking a few seconds off a marathon time can be the be all and end all. But there's still some problems with this. They still cost, thousands of pounds, and they turn your sort of bedroom into a NASA training camp. So it's a lot of athletes find it very difficult to fit in with their regime unless they're sort of super dedicated. So Scotland come up with this sort of what they saw as an opportunity for personal altitude simulators that could give similar benefits, but you could use it for an hour a night while sitting watching TV and then stick it in a drawer at the end of the day. So it would open up the market to a much wider audience at a much lower price. So they had this sort of challenge or opportunity, and they approached us. We went into our sort of first phase of Discover. When they came to us, first of all, we were actually pretty skeptical. We thought, will people actually want this device? And that's really how we approached that first phase, is trying to discover, was there a product in this, bringing sort of altitude training camps only used by elite athletes, trying to make that a sort of more mass market product. So the first thing we did was, obviously we're not physiologists, we're not sports scientists, so we had to dig into a lot of research into the background of IH over the last few decades, which is, a lot of it's in Russian, so it's, struggle a bit to keep up. Trying to understand the subject matter itself. And then the next step was just to go out and actually start speaking to people, observing people, taking into all the methodologies that the people this morning were talking about through their talks. My colleague Craig, who's the lead designer, even sort of dusted off his bike and started a triathlon training program. We're always talking about empathy as designers, so that was it was a major sacrifice for him to get involved. So you went out and met athletes of all levels, from elite Olympic athletes all the way down to sort of club level, to find out what their opinions were on a sort of personal device that could give them these sort of so-called sort of magical gains. And overall, it was actually very positive. I mean, we were almost taken aback by the sheer determination in any way, legal way, I should sort of add to that athletes can to gain an advantage over their peers. So they were really interested by the idea. But the one sort of, as we went into the define section of the design process, one of the insights that came out was they don't like change. Athletes, they've got a set training program, their coaches have worked with them very hard to put that in place, and any change to that is really scary. So well, on one hand, they wanted to try it, on the other hand, they were very reluctant. So it became apparent to us that it was the user experience and not just the technology of the product had to be aligned to the sort of needs of the athletes themselves. And we also learned that the coaches were a huge influence. Like these guys and women wouldn't go to the toilet without their coaches saying so. So it was understanding the stakeholders in the process. As well for elite athletes, it's understanding the governing body of the associations. Would they endorse this? Would they sort of say this is a good product to use? Although if that couldn't happen, it would be very difficult for any market penetration with this product. So again, it's looking for desirability, viability, and feasibility. How we can sort of best integrate all these areas of research. So again, in the define stage, after we'd sort of uncovered these insights, it's about making a sort of plan that you can actually act on and start to sort of build prototypes and iterate and go forward to a viable product. As we've all seen this, fairly familiar with the idea goes in and then it's sort of designed, built, tested in an iterative manner until we've come out the other end with something that we can use. So along this process, we normally in a project we have a sort of parallel design and engineering prototyping strategy. So we don't just make something work and then make it look pretty at the end, sort of lipstick on a pig type of process. We always like to see if we can develop both in parallel. So originally, you make these full models and you think, wouldn't it be great? Users wanted something this size they could put in their pocket. That's no problem. We gave this device and checked about usability and convenience. So the athletes wanted to stick it in a sports bag. That was fantastic. But unfortunately, reality set in through calculations and working with a computational fluid dynamics company that worked with F1 teams and looking at the gas mixing and to reach the equilibrium of the types of depleted oxygen levels we need to actually give any impact. We found out that it had to be more like this size. So this thing looking like a bit like a Dalek was the sort of first working prototype we got to. And to get from here to here, there was probably about 50 stages of cardboard models, pieces of tin foil, all sorts, to get to the first working model. Really the key to this project going forward was, does this thing actually deliver the benefits that the company hoped it would? So this was the sort of proof of principle. The whole project hinged upon this working. So we internally tested it. As I said, Craig's halfway through his triathlon training program now, and he's getting fitter by the day. We worked with a university to set up a trial. So we had 13 participants over 1 month who were already club level athletes. We gave them one of these devices. We went through a host of tests at the start. They used this on the training program for 28 days. So you use it for 1 hour on and off, 6 minutes on, 4 minutes off, every second day on the lead up to an event. And then we brought them in at the end and they went through the same absolutely horrible, brutal tests at the end to see whether their fitness had improved, even though their training regime was exactly the same. And thankfully for us, or the project would have ended there pretty much. We saw some pretty incredible results. Even the Dr. Chris Easton and his team of physiologists were pretty surprised. Again, like everybody else, how can breathing through what is a tube with some foam in it and a bit of CO2 actually improve performance? So yeah, we saw improved power, aerobic capacity and efficiency. And the big one here is the sort of VO2 max. So that's the sort of gold standard for endurance athletes. And a 4% increase in VO2 max doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's exceedingly difficult for fit people to increase their VO2 max levels. Normally after your sort of late 20s, early 30s, it just starts to tail off, and it's just pretty much that getting older inevitable. So in the test subjects, that was one of the incredible factors. And all of this was without changing any of the blood parameters, which is where all the cyclists are getting a hugely scrutinised. So there was no changes in sort of hemoglobin levels, which was a sort of massive win for everyone. So after that, we all had a bit of a celebration, thought, right, project's going forward, now time to get back to work. And I always find that the sort of fun bit of the iteration and building prototypes, that's always really energising. And then you've got the deliver phase where it's down to the nitty-gritty and trying to actually implement and get something to market. And this is the area that people always find, in my experience, the most draining, because it's just a huge amount of resource and detailed work to get something from good old Dalek here to a finished certified product. So this part of the process actually took over a year between we went through tooling, injection mold tooling through one of our partners in the Far East. We had to go through something like 10 different trials to get the tolerances right of the mixing chamber. And I was talking about failure earlier on, and that's one of the things that normally people don't speak about too much when we're talking about design processes. You get this lovely process and out pops a wonderful product and everybody sails off into the sunset and makes millions of pounds, but that sort of part of the process was hugely difficult. As well as the physical product, they also had through one of the insights come out to try and help adoption of the product and make it a less scary proposition to breathe through a tube while sitting in your living room. We developed a sort of companion training, which is a sort of digital training assistant, which sort of helps people understand how to control their breathing properly and takes them through the whole process. While they're using the device, you also have a Bluetooth pulse oximeter on, so it monitors your SpO2 levels, your blood oxygen levels, making sure it doesn't drop too low, and sort of coaching you through that so you don't end up in any sort of state of panic. So everything from tooling, manufacturing, even things like documentation, certification. It was a hugely long road. But last March, I think it was, we released the product at the bike show and down in the Excel Centre, and it was received a hugely positive reaction. Over the last year, we've continued to work with ScotLab because they saw the benefits and a sort of design team could bring beyond just getting the product to market. So we've worked with them in a sort of strategy capacity all the way along from the last year. And it's been hard work. It's like a lot of disruptive innovations. Actually convincing or educating the market's a big part of it. So over the last 6 months, we've seen continued growth in the markets, and they now have interested distributors in the US and the Far East, where triathlon and endurance sports are a hugely growing market. It received a lot of positive independent reviews where people have actually, a lot of skeptics have taken it out and tried it themselves and actually come back with the same findings. So that's really helped to sort of reinforce the message, and at the moment it's been shortlisted for the Triathlon 220 Innovation of the Year. So fingers crossed next month I can have a glass of champagne for that. So hopefully that's given a little bit of a real world example how the design process can make this sort of really difficult and sometimes treacherous journey of product development that little bit more certain. So thanks very much.